Unrest which is breaking out right across the region from the Gulf to North Africa. Joining us once again in the studio, Ibrahim Sharqiya from the Brookings Centre here in Doha. Let's start, of course, with the situation in Libya. Now, how significant is it that we've got this flurry of diplomatic activity that seems to be talking about further measures against Gaddafi?
The measures are very important at this particular point because we have seen that Gaddafi militia are now going outside Tripoli and attacking AlJazeera.
It looks like they're getting ready for some kind of big clash, doesn't it?
Yes, that is correct, I'm afraid. And we are probably talking about 2,000 soldiers that are still allying with Gaddafi, and they're attacking, preparing for an attack on AlJazeera. So it's very important that, again, we continue to target the regime and the regime individuals, because the key point that will change the situation is more people from either the military or from the militia of al-Gaddafi joining the revolution, and that's what will change the balance of power in Libya and try to put an end to the crisis sooner than later.
All right, let's shift now a little bit to Yemen. How precarious has the president's position become with that announcement of the opposition going to join the protesters now?
It's very precarious, it's very serious, and I've been following the Yemeni crisis for the past 3 weeks and very closely, and only yesterday we have seen very credible indicators that the balance of power in Yemen is shifting. It's changing. The protests are gaining momentum, gaining significant support.
Has Ali Abdullah Saleh lost the upper hand then?
Not yet, but there is serious shift in the balance of power in Yemen.
If he goes, does that mean the end of Yemen as we know it?
Not yet, because again, the developments yesterday happened are very important, very crucial, with the two big tribes in Yemen joining the revolution and supporting the revolution and calling for the end of Ali Saleh regime. But it's still, he's still in control, in full control of the army. We haven't seen any defection from the army or from other forces. So he's still in full control of the army, but he is losing control over the tribes. And Yemen is a very tribal society, and especially the importance is that one of the big tribes that announced the support to the protesters yesterday is actually the president's tribe. So it's
a worrying development for him.
Yeah,
we've been watching the situation going on in Bahrain, haven't we? Now we have some level of demonstrations going on in Oman.
Yes.
Is this spreading to the rest of the Gulf, the oil and gas-rich Gulf, or is this something that's really specific to those countries?
I think it is very specific to Oman and Bahrain in particular. We are aware of some sectarian issues in Bahrain and some other gas issues as well in Oman. So this is not very surprising. Actually, the protests or the demonstrations in Oman are not new to this crisis, and even happened before the whole revolution in the Arab world started, even before Tunisia and before Egypt. We saw some tension in the past, so the tension is building up, and it falls within the expectations and the paradigm that we have seen over the past years in Bahrain and in Oman as well. I don't think it will go in, at least in the foreseeable future, that it's going to extend beyond Bahrain and Oman.
All right, Ibrahim Sharqiya from the Brookings Institute there.
Thank you.
Well, thousands of migrant workers have fled Libya since the start of the country's uprising. Many countries, including China, have been organizing the evacuation of their citizens. Well, still ahead on the program, we'll hear about the plight of others who haven't been so lucky. And Hollywood's A-list gathers in Los Angeles for the 83rd Academy Awards. Who's going home with an Oscar? We'll tell you in a few moments.
Hello again. Brazil again is looking very, very wet at the moment. On the satellite picture, you can see this bright white cloud here that's all gradually making its way northwards, and it is making its way up towards parts of Venezuela and Colombia. Torrentially heavy downpours there, and another clump of cloud there making its way through parts of Peru. Now, many of these countries have already seen some flooding, and it looks like the wet weather will continue as we head through Monday. Heavy downpours again, particularly in the northeastern parts of Brazil here, but also the rain's now pepping up down towards Rio and Sao Paulo once more as well. For Buenos Aires, though, here it should be dry and pretty hot. Our temperatures making it up to around 30 degrees. As we head towards the southern parts of Africa, there's lots of wet weather here at the moment. Still very heavy downpours there across many parts of Madagascar. Then that crosses through parts of Mozambique and all the way across into Angola. Torrential downpours out of that. The heaviest are going to be here in the east. Further south, that's where it should be a lot drier and brighter. Durban there will get to around 28 degrees during the day, and that's 82 in Fahrenheit. Now here in Doha, there's been a fair amount of cloud, a couple of spots of rain recently, and it looks like it will still be a little bit grey at times on Monday. The cloud, though, does get thicker as it works its way eastwards, and it does turn to snow there over parts of northern India and Afghanistan.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in unification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. Let's recap the top story now. Tunisia's interim prime minister stepped down. Al-Baji Qa'id Sebsi will succeed Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It follows renewed violence in the capital, Tunis, prior to his departure. A soldier has been killed, 2 wounded in an attack on a military checkpoint in the Yemeni town of Abyan. Opposition parties say they plan to join anti-government protests to put more pressure on President Ali Abdullah Saleh to step down. The city closest to Libya's capital has been seized by anti-Gaddafi protesters. But demonstrators in a Zawiya believe Libyan troops on the outskirts are preparing a counter-attack. The UN Refugee Agency says it's facing a humanitarian emergency as foreigners pour out of Libya. It says close to 100,000 migrant workers have fled to Tunisia in the past week, most from Egypt and Tunisia. But labour groups say tens of thousands of Asians remain trapped in Libya. Let's run you through some of the figures then. An estimated 60,000 Bangladeshis are thought to be in Libya. It's unclear when or if they'll all be pulled out. Last week, relatives of 23,000 Thai workers asked for help to get them out. Thailand says it started evacuations. And roughly 30,000 Filipinos were working in Libya when the crisis began. Well, reports say the country's new foreign minister went to Libya himself to get hundreds of them out. Well, to discuss some more of this situation, Edmund Bond joins me now from Kuala Lumpur. He's a human rights lawyer. Thanks so much for joining us. Who's responsible in this sort of situation when you've got perhaps even hundreds of thousands of workers and people trapped in a sort of revolutionary situation?
Yeah, I think many countries in the Middle East, and especially now in Libya, is in a humanitarian crisis. And I think it's not only a legal but a moral duty on governments to bring back their nationals. And it's surprising that the Bangladeshi government is taking a wait-and-see attitude towards removing 60,000 of them. I think many of them have fled to the borders and I think will become refugees. But it's something that the Bangladeshi government can't wash their hands off. I think it's time for them to act as quickly as possible.
But what if they can't? They haven't got the resources to evacuate that number. I mean, I'm reading here a statement by Bangladesh, which is an example that you gave, where they're saying it's not clear what measures we will be able to take to evacuate them.
Yeah, I think, for example, like China sent 2 charter planes. I think with Bangladesh, the government don't have the resources or the capacity. I think it's really necessary to immediately get foreign assistance and international cooperation, getting help from the UN especially. And I think I've not really seen strong statements from the UN to say that they will be offering assistance to these different countries.
Is the problem also compounded by the fact that they're not only fleeing a revolution in Libya, but they're fleeing to another country, Tunisia, which is still also grappling with with what's just happened there in terms of the revolution?
Yeah, and that's why I think that there will be, it's worrying because the refugee numbers will definitely increase, and I think UNHCR has already sounded their concern. I think that whole region has now become some sort of a time bomb, and it's necessary that all countries actually pour in assistance and try and reduce the refugee count.
Do you think that perhaps those countries which were able and rushed resources in to evacuate their own nationals should have been a little more generous in trying to help others in this sort of situation?
Sure, but I think the problem about dealing with foreigners, people not of the same country, will lead to complications with governments. And I think at the moment, in respect of the Bangladeshi foreign workers, it's an imperative. 60,000 is a huge, huge number.
All right, thanks for your thoughts on this very complicated situation. Edmund Bon. Dozens of men, women and children have been fleeing Côte d'Ivoire's main city despite the presence of UN peacekeepers. There's been more fighting between forces loyal to incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo and those who back the opposition leader Alassane Ouattara. The UN's Human Rights Agency says between 20 and 30,000 people have left just one district in Abidjan. New Zealand is facing a $15 billion repair bill after 2 recent earthquakes. Last week's quake in Christchurch killed at least 148 people. At least another 50 are still missing. Funerals are being held for some of the victims on Monday. Large parts of the city have been reduced to rubble. Representatives from China and Japan have held their first talks in 2 years as tensions between the 2 Asian economic giants ease. China's deputy foreign minister met his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo to discuss issues ranging from the film industry to security. Sino-Japanese relations deteriorated sharply last September after a Chinese trawler collided with Japanese patrol boats. Police in Wisconsin say they won't force pro-union demonstrators to leave the state capitol building. Hundreds of protesters defied an order to vacate as police looked on. They've been demonstrating for the past 2 weeks against the governor's plan to strip most public sector employees of their collective bargaining rights. Well, Cuban government supporters have confronted a group of dissidents calling for political change. The so-called Ladies in White were staging their usual Sunday demonstration when government supporters surrounded them and started shouting insults. The women are mostly the wives and mothers of political prisoners. Hollywood's biggest event of the year, the 83rd Academy Awards, has come to a close. AlJazeera's Rob Reynolds was there to see who walked away with the top prize at this year's Oscars.
And the Oscar goes to The King's Speech, Ian Canning.
The story of a stammering sovereign won Hollywood's top honor Sunday as The King's Speech scored Best Picture. Colin Firth's performance as a king tormented by a speech impediment and self-doubt earned him the Best Actor Oscar. The film world's shining stars and lesser lights strutted down the red carpet in their best tuxedos and most glamorous gowns, despite unusually chilly temperatures that set many bare shoulders shivering. This year's Best Actress award went to Natalie Portman in Black Swan for her compelling portrayal of a ballerina pushed over the edge of madness even as she achieves an artistic triumph.
This is insane, and I truly, sincerely wish that the prize tonight was to get to work with my fellow nominees. I'm so in awe of you.
A gritty boxing film scored an Oscars 1-2 punch as both Melissa Leo and Christian Bale took home Oscars for Best Supporting Actor and Actress in The Fighter. The warmest applause of the night was showered on Portman. She fell in love with the choreographer on the set of Black Swan, and they're expecting a baby boy this spring. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Hollywood.
You're watching Al Jazeera. Time to recap the headlines now. The city closest to Libya's capital has been seized by anti-Qaddafi protesters. The demonstrators in a zawiya believe Libyan